My name is Lois. I'm 58 years old, and I used to think I had the perfect extended family. Last summer, I was hosting our annual barbecue in my backyard here in Phoenix, watching my 3 grandchildren splash in the pool, while my son-in-law Marcus held court with his golf buddies. For 12 years, I'd supported this man through everything, believing I was investing in my daughter's happiness and my grandchildren's future. But that sunny afternoon, when Marcus looked me straight in the eye and called me a pathetic loser in front of everyone, he had no idea what was about to hit him. Before we dive into this story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And please hit that like button and subscribe, because this tale will show you exactly why family boundaries matter more than blood. It all started back in 2012 when my daughter Sarah brought Marcus home for Thanksgiving. I was still adjusting to life as a widow, having lost my husband Robert just 18 months earlier. The life insurance settlement had left me financially comfortable, but emotionally I was struggling to find my new normal. Sarah was 26, then working as a dental hygienist, and she seemed absolutely smitten with this charming young man who called me Mum from the very first dinner. Marcus was 28, a recent business school graduate with a degree that looked impressive on paper, but hadn't translated into stable employment. He had that easy confidence that comes naturally to some people, the kind of smile that made you want to trust him immediately. He drove a beat-up Honda Civic that barely lived in a cramped studio apartment, and carried $48,000 in student loan debt like a weight around his shoulders. But what struck me most was how he treated Sarah. He was attentive, affectionate, and seemed genuinely devoted to making her happy. When he asked for her hand in marriage 6 months later, I couldn't have been more thrilled. Here was a young man who clearly loved my daughter, and I had the means to help them build a solid foundation for their future together. The first check I wrote was for those student loans. $48,000 seemed like a reasonable wedding gift, especially when I saw the relief in both their faces. Marcus actually cried when I handed him the bank draft, promising he'd never forget my generosity. Sarah hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe, whispering that I was giving them the fresh start they'd dreamed of. Next came the house. They'd been looking at starter homes in modest neighborhoods, but I suggested we aim a little higher. Why not get them something with room to grow somewhere they could raise the grandchildren I was already imagining? The 3-bedroom house in Tempe was perfect, with a small backyard and good schools nearby. The $20,000 down payment seemed like nothing compared to the joy on their faces when they got the keys. Marcus struggled to find steady work that first year. He'd get hired at marketing firms or small businesses, but somehow the positions never worked out. There was always a reason: the boss didn't appreciate his ideas, the company culture wasn't a good fit, or the market conditions weren't favorable for someone with his skill set. Each job loss meant I'd step in to cover the mortgage payment just temporarily, just until he got back on his feet. When Sarah got pregnant with their first child, Emma, the temporary help became more regular. Marcus was spending more time at home, claiming he was building a consulting business, but I never saw any clients or income from this venture. The nursery needed to be perfect for my first grandchild, so I paid for the renovation. When his old Honda finally died completely, I bought him a reliable used Toyota Camry. Nothing too flashy, just dependable transportation for a growing family. By the end of that first year, I'd spent $63,000 beyond the original student loan payoff. But watching Emma take her first steps in that beautiful nursery, seeing Sarah's contented smile as she rocked her baby in the chair, I'd bought it all felt worth it. This was what family was supposed to be about: supporting each other, investing in the next generation. I told myself this was temporary, that Marcus would find his footing professionally and start contributing more substantially. I never asked for repayment schedules or signed any formal agreements. These were gifts, investments in my daughter's happiness and my grandchildren's security. What could be more important than that? The next few years brought a steady expansion of what Marcus and Sarah considered necessary for their lifestyle. When Sarah announced her second pregnancy, Marcus declared they needed more space. The 3-bedroom house that had seemed perfect suddenly felt cramped. He'd found a beautiful 4-bedroom home in Scottsdale with a 2-car garage and a small pool. The children needed room to play, he reasoned, and the neighborhood had better schools. I found myself co-signing the mortgage because Marcus's employment history was still too spotty for him to qualify a loan. The down payment was another $40,000, but seeing little Emma's excitement about having her own playroom made it feel justified. Baby Jacob arrived that spring, and suddenly we had 2 grandchildren who needed the best of everything. The Toyota Camry became inadequate for family needs. Sarah needed something safer for transporting 2 car seats, and Marcus pointed out that the Camry's reliability issues were becoming a safety concern. The Honda Pilot I purchased was practical and spacious, perfect for a growing family. The monthly payment was only $480, and I could easily cover that along with their mortgage. Marcus enrolled in community college, claiming he needed additional credentials to advance his consulting career. The tuition and books were reasonable expenses, especially when he showed me brochures for the business management program. He was finally taking concrete steps toward building a stable career, and I was proud to support his educational goals. That's when the credit card situation began. Marcus approached me with what seemed like a reasonable request. Family emergencies came up unexpectedly, he explained, and it would be helpful if he could access credit for urgent situations when I wasn't immediately available. I added him as an authorized user to one of my cards with a $5,000 limit. The monthly statements started showing charges I hadn't expected. Dinner at upscale restaurants. Electronics purchases, golf equipment. Designer clothes for both Marcus and Sarah. When I questioned these expenses, Marcus had explanations ready. The restaurant meals were business meetings with potential clients. The electronics were necessary for his home office setup. The golf equipment was for networking with business contacts. The clothes were investments in professional image. Gradually, the credit limit increased to accommodate their needs. 1 card became 2, then 3, with a combined limit of $25,000. The monthly payments were manageable from my perspective, and Marcus always expressed gratitude for my flexibility and understanding. He was building a business, he reminded me, and successful entrepreneurs had to invest in appearances and relationships. The first business venture was landscaping. Marcus had researched the market and identified a genuine need for high-quality landscaping services in Scottsdale's affluent neighborhoods. He needed a truck commercial-grade equipment and initial capital for marketing and supplies. $15,000 seemed reasonable for a legitimate business startup, especially when he showed me his detailed business plan and projected income statements. 8 months later, the landscaping business had failed. The equipment had mysteriously disappeared, sold off piece by piece, to cover operating expenses that never seemed to generate corresponding income. Marcus blamed the failure on seasonal fluctuations and untrustworthy employees, but he'd already identified his next opportunity: online retail. The online business required $12,000 for inventory, website development, and marketing campaigns. Marcus showed me successful examples of similar ventures and projected revenue that would easily cover my investment within the first year. When that business failed to generate meaningful income, he moved on to pursuing his real estate license. Each venture followed the same pattern: initial enthusiasm and detailed planning, followed by months of expenses without corresponding income, then eventual abandonment as Marcus identified new opportunities that required fresh capital investment. The real estate licensing course cost $3,000, but Marcus never actually completed the program or took the licensing exam. Meanwhile, Sarah had stopped working after Jacob was born and showed no signs of returning to her dental hygienist position. She was busy with the children, she explained, and Marcus's business ventures required her support with administrative tasks and networking events. The loss of her income meant even more dependence on my financial support. I was paying for groceries, utilities, children's clothing and activities, and increasingly frequent family outings to restaurants and entertainment venues. The monthly total had grown to over $3,000, but I justified it as temporary support while Marcus built his career. Sarah seemed happy the grandchildren were thriving, and I felt proud of my role in making their comfortable lifestyle possible. Marcus's attitude toward money began changing during this period. He stopped expressing gratitude for my support and started treating it as an expected part of our family arrangement. He made subtle comments about my being too conservative with investments, suggesting I didn't understand modern business practices or the importance of taking calculated risks. Years 6 through 9 brought lifestyle inflation that should have alarmed me, but I was too emotionally invested to recognize the warning signs. Marcus convinced Sarah they needed to upgrade their living situation again. The Scottsdale house was nice, but it wasn't making the right impression on potential business contacts and clients. They needed something that reflected success and prosperity. Something that would attract the kind of high-net-worth individuals who could become major clients. The house in Paradise Valley was stunning. 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a resort-style pool with waterfall and a 4-car garage. The neighborhood was exclusive home to business executives, professional athletes, and successful entrepreneurs. The mortgage required an $80,000 down payment, and monthly payments jumped to $4,200. I co-signed the mortgage because Marcus still couldn't qualify independently, but I convinced myself this was a smart investment. Real estate in Paradise Valley held its value well, and the house would appreciate significantly over time. We weren't just upgrading their lifestyle, we were building generational wealth for my grandchildren. The Honda Pilot suddenly seemed inadequate for their new neighborhood. Sarah needed something more sophisticated for school pickup lines and social events. The BMW X5 I purchased was practical but luxurious, perfect for a successful family. Marcus required something that projected business success and professional credibility. The Audi A6 was understated but impressive, exactly right for client meetings and networking events. Combined car payments reached $960 monthly, plus insurance maintenance and registration fees. But seeing Sarah's confidence behind the wheel of her new BMW, watching her fit in seamlessly with other parents at school events, made the expense feel worthwhile. Marcus joined the prestigious Scottsdale Country Club, explaining that serious business networking required access to the right social circles. The $15,000 initiation fee was steep, but the monthly dues and dining expenses that followed were even more substantial. Golf lessons, equipment tournament fees, and countless meals with potential business partners averaged $2,000 monthly on my credit cards. The children's education became another major expense category. Marcus and Sarah decided public school wasn't adequate for their family's aspirations. Private schools would provide better academic preparation, smaller class sizes, and connections with other successful families. Tuition for all 3 children reached $36,000 annually, plus uniform supplies, field trips, and extracurricular activities. Emma started piano lessons, tennis coaching, and horseback riding. Jacob joined a competitive soccer team that required expensive equipment and travel to tournaments. When Sarah became pregnant with their 3rd child, Sophia, the activities and expenses multiplied again. Every birthday party became an elaborate production, costing more than most families spent on entire vacations. Marcus's business claims became more sophisticated but less verifiable. He described himself as an investment consultant, had business cards printed, and rented a small office in a professional building. He attended conferences, scheduled networking lunches, and maintained all the appearances of a successful business owner. When I asked about specific clients or income, he became defensive about proprietary information and client confidentiality. The office rent business meals conference fees and professional development courses all appeared on my credit cards. Marcus showed me fake contracts and inflated income projections, convincing me to liquidate some of my own investments to provide capital for guaranteed business opportunities. Each deal mysteriously fell through at the last minute, but there was always another opportunity on the horizon. Sarah fully embraced their upgraded lifestyle and social status. She stopped even pretending to look for work, claiming her role as wife and mother required full-time dedication. She became focused on maintaining appearances, keeping up with neighborhood standards, and ensuring the children had every advantage their classmates enjoyed. Both Marcus and Sarah began treating my financial support as an entitlement rather than a generous gift. They made decisions about major purchases and presented me with bills rather than asking for approval. They scheduled family vacations and assumed I'd want to treat my grandchildren to memorable experiences, regardless of the cost. After 8 years of escalating support, I calculated I'd spent over $400,000 on their lifestyle. My retirement savings had been depleted by 60%, and I was living on a fixed income while funding their luxury expenses. I was starting to feel genuine financial stress, but I felt trapped between enabling their dependence and potentially devastating my grandchildren's stability. The final years before everything exploded were marked by increasingly disrespectful behavior and financial manipulation that I somehow convinced myself to tolerate. Marcus had stopped calling me Mum years earlier, now addressing me by my first name, in a tone that suggested he was doing me a favor by acknowledging my presence. The grateful young man who'd cried over student loan forgiveness had been replaced by someone who treated my support as insufficient compensation for allowing me access to his family. Marcus began making financial decisions without consulting me, then presenting me with bills as accomplished facts. A family vacation to Hawaii appeared on my credit card as a $12,000 surprise charge. Marcus had booked flights, resort accommodations, and activities for a week-long trip, then casually mentioned they'd assumed I'd want to treat my grandchildren to such a memorable experience. When I questioned the expense, Marcus acted hurt that I'd begrudge my own grandchildren a vacation. He pointed out that other families in their social circle took multiple luxury trips annually, and he didn't want Emma, Jacob, and Sophia to feel deprived compared to their friends. The guilt manipulation was subtle but effective, and I found myself apologizing for questioning his judgment. The disrespect extended beyond financial matters. Marcus started interrupting me during conversations, dismissing my opinions as outdated or irrelevant. He made jokes about my conservative views in front of the grandchildren, teaching them to see me as an old-fashioned relic who didn't understand modern life. He criticized my clothing choices when we attended social events together, suggesting I was embarrassing the family with my appearance. Social gatherings became exercises in humiliation, disguised as family togetherness. Marcus would exclude me from family photos at important events, claiming too many people made the pictures look crowded. He'd introduce me to his friends with subtle put-downs, describing me as his mother-in-law, who meant well, but didn't really understand business or investing. The manipulation tactics became more sophisticated and cruel. Marcus learned to use my grandchildren as leverage for any expense he wanted approved. School supplies, clothing, equipment for activities, anything the children needed, became my responsibility by default. If I hesitated about any purchase, Marcus would imply I was being selfish, choosing money over my own grandchildren's welfare and happiness. He used Sarah's stress and exhaustion as additional guilt weapons. Motherhood was demanding, he'd remind me, and Sarah deserved nice things and relaxing experiences. When she looked tired or overwhelmed, Marcus would suggest spa days, shopping trips, or weekend getaways that appeared on my credit cards as solutions to problems I felt responsible for creating. The business charade reached new levels of audacity. Marcus claimed to be on the verge of a major breakthrough deal that would finally make our family wealthy enough to pay me back with interest. He needed just a little more capital for the final push, he assured me, showing fake contracts and wildly optimistic financial projections. I liquidated additional investments to provide what he claimed was bridge funding for guaranteed returns. The money disappeared into lifestyle expenses within weeks, and the breakthrough deal mysteriously collapsed due to factors beyond Marcus's control. But there was always another opportunity, always one more investment that would solve everything. My physical and mental health began deteriorating under the constant financial stress and emotional manipulation. I developed anxiety about my own financial future, lying awake calculating how long my remaining savings would last. My doctor prescribed blood pressure medication after concerning readings during routine checkups. Friends expressed worry about my supporting a grown man who showed no inclination towards self-sufficiency. I felt trapped in a situation I'd created through my own generosity and naive trust. Cutting off support felt like abandoning my grandchildren, but continuing felt like enabling behavior that was destroying my own security and self-respect. Marcus had convinced me I was dependent on them for companionship and purpose, that my life would be empty and meaningless without my role as family benefactor. The final provocation came when Marcus announced plans for another house upgrade. The Paradise Valley home was nice, but he'd found a stunning property that would really establish their position in Scottsdale's elite social circles. He wanted me to co-sign a mortgage on $1 million home with amenities that would allow them to entertain clients and business associates properly. When I hesitated, Marcus became angry for the first time in our relationship. He accused me of holding them back, of being fearful and small-minded when successful people were willing to take calculated risks. He said I was stuck in a poverty mindset that prevented me from understanding how wealth was really built and maintained. The stage was set for the confrontation that would change everything, but I had no idea how explosive the situation was about to become. The annual summer barbecue at my house had been a family tradition for over a decade. This year, I spent 3 days preparing for what would become the most humiliating and transformative experience of my life. I shopped for premium steaks and fresh vegetables, cleaned every surface of my Phoenix home until it sparkled and decorated the backyard with flowers and twinkling lights. I wanted everything perfect because Marcus had invited his parents along with several business associates and golf buddies from the country club. This felt like an important social event for their family, and I was determined to show I could still host graciously, despite the financial stress I'd been hiding from everyone. I wore my best summer dress, applied makeup carefully, and tried to project the confidence of a woman who had everything under control. Inside, I was calculating the cost of every appetizer and drink, wondering how much longer I could maintain this facade of abundance while my own security crumbled. The guests began arriving around 4 in the afternoon. Marcus immediately took center stage by the pool-holding court with his friends, while Sarah played the role of supportive wife discussing private school choices and upcoming vacation plans with other wives. The children splashed happily in the pool while I served drinks and appetizers, feeling increasingly invisible as the afternoon progressed. Marcus's parents praised him effusively for providing so well for his family. They marveled at the beautiful house, expensive cars in the driveway, and obvious prosperity that surrounded their son's life. Marcus accepted their admiration graciously, never mentioning my role in creating the lifestyle they were admiring. The conversation turned to business and investing when David, one of Marcus's golf buddies, mentioned struggling with the tough economy and difficulty making ends meet despite working long hours at his accounting firm. Marcus laughed dismissively, claiming money was never an issue for smart investors who understood how to make their capital work efficiently. He began boasting about his diversified investment portfolio, his strategic business acquisitions, and his ability to identify opportunities that less sophisticated people missed entirely. Marcus offered to take David under his wing, sharing some of his investment strategies and business insights that had made their family so financially successful. I felt physically sick listening to these elaborate lies about money that was actually mine. Every investment Marcus described, every business success he claimed, every strategic decision he took credit for, was funded entirely by my savings and credit. David was asking for advice from someone whose only business skill was manipulating a widow into supporting his lifestyle. When David complimented the beautiful house and expensive cars, Marcus launched into a detailed explanation of his calculated risks and smart investments. He described the real estate appreciation strategy, the benefits of leveraging credit for investment opportunities, and the importance of not being afraid to spend money to make money. The final straw came when Marcus claimed that people who hoarded their savings in conservative investments were stuck in a poverty mindset that prevented them from building real wealth. He said successful entrepreneurs understood that money sitting in savings accounts was money wasted, that true wealth required courage and vision that most people simply didn't possess. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Something inside me snapped as I listened to this man lecture others about financial wisdom while living entirely off my sacrificed security. I quietly interrupted his monologue, mentioning that I had helped with some of the expenses he was describing as his personal achievements. Marcus's face darkened immediately. He told me sharply not to confuse people with unnecessary details, his tone carrying a warning that I should stop talking before I embarrassed him in front of his important guests. But 12 years of suppressed frustration and mounting resentment made it impossible for me to remain silent. When I persisted, gently pointing out that my contributions had been substantial, Marcus exploded with a rage I'd never seen before. In front of everyone, he looked me straight in the eye and said, "Listen here, you pathetic old loser. Just because you write some checks doesn't mean you built this life." The pool area fell completely silent. Marcus continued his verbal assault, telling me I was living in the past, clinging to them, because I had nothing else in my own life. He said they let me help because they felt sorry for me, but I shouldn't pretend my money made me important or entitled to credit for their success. Maybe if you understood business, instead of just throwing money around like some desperate old woman, he sneered, you'd have something to show for your own life instead of trying to buy your way into ours. He delivered these crushing words with a cruel smile, as if he was enjoying the opportunity to finally express what he'd been thinking for years. Marcus's parents stared at their plates in mortified silence. David and the other guests made awkward excuses and left quickly, clearly uncomfortable witnessing such a brutal family confrontation. Sarah sat frozen, refusing to make eye contact with anyone offering no defense of her mother or protest against her husband's cruelty. Marcus went inside to get another beer, acting as if nothing significant had happened, leaving me standing alone by the grill, with the devastating realization that 12 years of love sacrifice and financial support had earned me nothing but contempt. In that moment of complete humiliation, something fundamental shifted inside me. I understood with crystal clarity that Marcus hadn't just been taking my money, he'd been stealing my dignity and self-respect with my own permission. I realized my daughter had become complicit in emotional abuse, disguised as family togetherness. Standing in my own backyard, surrounded by the remnants of a party I'd paid for, I made a decision that would change everything. I finished cleaning up the barbecue alone that evening, moving through the tasks with mechanical precision, while my mind processed what had just occurred. Marcus and Sarah had left without offering to help or acknowledging that anything inappropriate had happened. The silence felt like additional confirmation that they considered his behavior acceptable. I sat at my kitchen table until past midnight, creating a detailed spreadsheet that calculated every dollar I'd spent supporting their lifestyle over 12 years. The final number was staggering $647,312. More than half my retirement savings gone to fund the lifestyle of someone who saw me as a pathetic old woman deserving of public humiliation. But for the first time in years, I felt completely calm and focused. The crushing anxiety about money and family approval had been replaced by absolute clarity about what needed to happen next. I wasn't angry or vindictive, just determined to align my actions with my values and self-respect. Monday morning at 8 a.m. sharp, I called each credit card company and removed Marcus as an authorized user from all 3 accounts. I changed passwords and security questions, blocked automatic payments for their mortgage car loans, and country club dues. The customer service representatives were efficient and professional, treating these changes as routine account maintenance. Next, I visited my bank and met with the mortgage officer who'd helped arrange their home loans. I requested immediate removal from co-signer positions on both houses, learning that I could transfer full obligation to Marcus if he could qualify independently. We scheduled an appointment for Marcus to complete financial qualification paperwork, though I knew he'd never qualify without my income backing him. I spent the afternoon organizing every receipt, bank statement, and credit card bill from 12 years of financial support. I categorized expenses by type and created a comprehensive document that read like a business contract, complete with dates, amounts, and specific purposes for each expenditure. Tuesday morning, I called Sarah and requested an immediate family meeting at a neutral location. We met at a coffee shop in Scottsdale, where I placed a thick folder on the table between us when Marcus arrived 45 minutes late, acting casual and dismissive, as if our previous interaction had been a minor misunderstanding. Without emotion or preamble, I opened the folder and began reading aloud. Total financial support provided to Marcus Thompson and Sarah Wilson. Thompson from June 2012 through July 2024, $647,312. I showed them the detailed breakdown by year category and specific expenditure. Marcus tried to interrupt with jokes and deflection, suggesting I was being overly dramatic about normal family support. But I continued reading numbers in a steady business-like voice, while Sarah grew increasingly pale as the reality of our financial relationship became undeniable. Then I explained the new terms effective immediately. All financial support was permanently terminated. Marcus had 30 days to refinance both mortgages without my co-signature or face foreclosure proceedings. Car loans became his responsibility within 60 days. Credit card balances were his to pay, and I would no longer make any payments on his behalf. The country club membership was cancelled, and private school tuition became his responsibility for the upcoming semester. I would no longer pay for groceries, utilities, activities, or any other household expenses. Their family was now financially independent, which was what any healthy adult relationship should be. Marcus's response was predictable. Initial shock and disbelief gave way to attempted charm, calling me Mom for the first time in years and suggesting we could work out a reasonable payment plan for continued support. When that failed, he escalated to anger, accusing me of being vindictive and petty, destroying their family over a simple misunderstanding. He blamed me for creating their dependency, then withdrawing support without warning, calling my actions cruel and manipulative. The final threat came when he said I was destroying my relationship with my grandchildren, that they'd never understand why their grandmother abandoned them when they needed her most. Sarah finally spoke, asking what they were supposed to do without my support. I calmly suggested Marcus could get a job like other adults, that 40-year-old men typically supported their own families through employment rather than depending on their mothers-in-law for everything. She became defensive, saying I was destroying their family and abandoning my grandchildren over my hurt feelings. Marcus and Sarah left the coffee shop with him ranting about ungrateful relatives and threatening legal action for emotional distress and financial damages. That afternoon, I met with my family attorney to confirm my legal position. He assured me I had no obligation to continue supporting adult children, and their spouses documented the verbal abuse incident with witness statements and set up protection against potential lawsuits or claims against my remaining assets. My attorney actually praised my decision to establish clear boundaries, noting that many of his clients struggled with similar family financial abuse situations. He said my comprehensive documentation and methodical approach to terminating support showed wisdom and strength that would serve me well going forward. For the first time in 12 years, I went to bed knowing exactly where every dollar of my money was going, and it felt like the most peaceful sleep I'd had in over a decade. The collapse of Marcus and Sarah's artificial lifestyle happened faster and more completely than I'd ever imagined possible. Within 2 weeks of our coffee shop meeting, Marcus had failed the mortgage qualification process spectacularly. His employment history was too sporadic, his income too inconsistent, and his debt-to-income ratio too high for any legitimate lender to approve him independently. The bank initiated foreclosure proceedings on the Paradise Valley house when the first payment came due without my backing. The BMW and Audi were repossessed within the month when Marcus couldn't make the combined $960 monthly payments on his car dealer salary of $38,000 annually. The country club suspended his membership for non-payment, and the children were withdrawn from private school mid-semester. Marcus's desperate attempts to restore our previous arrangement were both pathetic and infuriating. He called repeatedly, alternating between threats and pleading sometimes within the same voicemail message. He sent flowers with an apology note, calling the barbecue incident a misunderstanding caused by stress and too much alcohol, promising it would never happen again. Sarah called crying about the children's disrupted education and social lives, begging me to reconsider my decision for their sake, if not for hers. Marcus's parents contacted me, asking me to be reasonable, suggesting that family disagreements shouldn't destroy children's stability and future opportunities. Marcus even showed up at my house unannounced, standing on my front porch, with tears in his eyes, calling me Mom, and saying he'd made a terrible mistake that he regretted every day. He promised to get counseling to find steady employment, to pay me back every dollar if I'd just restore enough support to prevent the family's complete financial destruction. But I'd changed my phone number, installed security cameras, and maintained a consistent message: financial support was permanently ended, period. I refused to negotiate partial assistance or discuss modified terms. Every communication attempt was forwarded to my attorney, who sent formal letters demanding that contact cease immediately. My focus shifted to my own financial recovery and emotional healing. I paid off the credit card debt Marcus had accumulated, refinanced my own mortgage to lower monthly payments, and began rebuilding my retirement savings with disciplined budgeting. I sold possessions I no longer needed, downsized my lifestyle appropriately, and felt genuine relief at having complete control over my own money again. The unexpected consequences for Marcus and Sarah's marriage became apparent within months. Financial stress revealed fundamental incompatibilities that had been hidden by artificial prosperity. Arguments about money, work, responsibilities, and lifestyle adjustments became constant background noise in their relationship. Sarah was forced to confront how much she'd taken my support for granted, how completely her family had become dependent on my subsidies for their basic lifestyle maintenance. Marcus had to face the reality that his business persona had been entirely funded by someone else's money, that he possessed no actual skills or income-generating abilities. The children adjusted to public school and scaled back activities with resilience that surprised everyone. Emma, Jacob, and Sophia seemed more grounded and realistic about money after experiencing the transition from artificial abundance to normal middle-class life. They asked why they couldn't see Grandma anymore, putting additional pressure on their parents to explain the situation. 8 months after I'd cut off support, Sarah requested a private meeting without Marcus present. We met at the same coffee shop where I'd announced the end of financial support, but this time she came alone and humble, ready to have an honest conversation about our relationship. Sarah admitted she finally understood why I'd cut off support, acknowledging that Marcus's treatment of me had been unacceptable, and that she'd been wrong to remain silent during his verbal abuse. She apologized for allowing our relationship to become corrupted by financial dependency and manipulation. She asked if our relationship could be repaired if there was a way forward that didn't involve money, but focused on genuine family connection. I agreed to explore rebuilding our relationship, but with completely different terms and boundaries that protected both of us from future financial manipulation. The new relationship required Sarah's commitment to preventing any future attempts at financial manipulation from Marcus. She had to accept that my financial support would never resume under any circumstances, that their family's financial independence was permanent and non-negotiable. I welcomed a relationship with my grandchildren based on love and time rather than money and gifts. We established a visiting schedule that respected everyone's needs, and I began building individual relationships with Emma, Jacob, and Sophia that didn't depend on my ability to fund their activities or desires. Marcus's evolution was slower and more grudging. He initially blamed me for all their family problems, claiming I destroyed their children's opportunities and damaged their social standing through my vindictive actions. But gradually, with no other options available, he was forced to take his car dealer job seriously and work longer hours to support his family independently. He stopped making grandiose business plans without capital, stopped networking at expensive venues he couldn't afford, and began living within the means his actual income provided. The resentment toward me remained, but without any leverage to express it effectively, he focused his energy on genuine work for the first time in his adult life. The life lessons from this experience transformed my understanding of love, family, and healthy relationships. I realized I had confused enabling with generosity, creating dependency instead of fostering independence. I learned that true support means helping people develop their own capabilities rather than solving their problems with money. Setting boundaries had actually improved my relationships by establishing mutual respect and genuine appreciation. The family connections based on love and time were more authentic than those based on financial obligation. My grandchildren respected me more when I stopped trying to buy their affection with expensive gifts and experiences. 18 months after cutting off financial support, my life was smaller in terms of social obligations and financial commitments, but infinitely more peaceful and authentic. My relationships were based on genuine care rather than financial dependency. My savings account was growing steadily, and my retirement security was restored. Most importantly, I'd learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop enabling someone's destructive behavior. Family relationships require mutual respect, not just biological connection. True love sometimes requires the courage to say no, even when saying yes would be easier in the short term. The day I stopped being Marcus's personal bank account was the day I started being myself again. When you love someone enough to let them struggle, you give them the chance to become who they're meant to be. That's a gift no amount of money can buy, and it's the most valuable lesson I learned from 12 years of financial manipulation disguised as family love. I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever been in a situation where family members took advantage of your generosity? How did you handle setting boundaries with people you love? Please share your experiences, because your stories might help someone else who's struggling with similar challenges. Don't forget to hit that like button. If this story resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life stories that matter. And share this video with anyone who might need to hear about the importance of family boundaries. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember that choosing self-respect over keeping peace is never the wrong decision. I wish you all the courage to protect your own well-being while still loving your family in healthy ways.